Hello, Chelsea fans, and welcome to The Blue Lens, your brand new home for the latest news, analysis, hot takes, and real talk surrounding our beloved Chelsea Football Club. I'm your host, Anuj, and I'm delighted to be kicking things off with our very first episode. We're covering all things Chelsea, from transfer news and rumours to the Club World Cup, where we've just beaten Benfica 4-1 in a 4.5-hour match, which started off being a challenging watch, I won't lie, but ended up following thunderstorm delays, a last gasp penalty equaliser from our old friend Angel Di Maria, and 3 Chelsea goals in the second half of extra time to head into the quarterfinals. Before we get into it, some of you may want to know a bit about me, and if you don't, feel free to skip ahead by about 30 seconds. So who am I? I'm your host, Anuj, a long-standing Chelsea fan, a lawyer by trade, and I think an all-around nice guy, but you can be the judge of that. I decided to start this channel alongside my day job as a disputes lawyer, and as part of that role, I've picked up various clients and contacts in the sports industry, including football clubs, sports organisations, and agencies. So why am I doing this? Well, look, that's a very good question. There's a lot of noise surrounding our club with news, PR from agents and the club parroted by certain journalists. And it's not always easy to unpick the truth and figure out what's real and what isn't. Now, I want this to be a channel that revolves around fans and community and helps to analyse the news and separate facts from PR. And look, it's natural that fans can be reactionary to things that we read and hear. It's just a key part of being loyal to the club. But too often that's taken advantage of by media, journalists, agents, and even the club hierarchy from time to time. So while I want to give my genuine reaction to things that I read and see about the club, I also want to bring you a healthy dose of realism. And I think that's sorely needed, especially in the post-Abramovich Blue Co era. I'd be interested to know whether you agree, disagree. Let me know down in the comments. Okay, that's my rant over, and hopefully that's the last one this episode. First up, let's talk about some potential silverware, which is, of course, exactly what the club is all about. Club World Cup is in full swing, and after our recent Europa Conference League triumph, this is our chance to conquer the world. Well, sort of. Firstly, game against Benfica, what a great Reece James free kick. Took the ball off Cole Palmer, shaped to hit it to the far post, beats the keeper at the near post instead. You love to see it. The ball even bounced over the line, I think, just before the line. Well before the keeper could get there. Maybe a keeper error in there as well, but let's skirt over that. I think it was a great piece of thinking from Reece. Now, the remaining goals came deep in extra time, forced by Di Maria's 96th minute penalty following a handball by Malo Gusto. I will say I think it was a bit unfortunate by Gusto. He put his hand in the air. It seemed kind of a natural body movement-ish. He wasn't really facing the ball. It was just one of those things. The laws are the laws, whether you agree with them or not on handball. It got given on review by VAR. Di Maria got his emotional moment for Benfica and slightly prolonged his career there before he has his move back to Argentina this summer. And then, much later, I think probably about 25 minutes later into additional time, an instinctive but scrappy goal from Nkunku, and then well-taken goals, it has to be said, from Pedro, Neto and Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, which followed. I should also mention, quite a big caveat is that all 3 of those goals came after Benfica went down to 10 men and so struggled with that kind of deep back line. And the latter 2 came when they were, of course, chasing for a winner deep into extra time. So, look, although we got the win, which is ultimately what matters, it was pretty scrappy at times, poor passing accuracy, so many misplaced passes, so many misplaced balls. Some of our key players had, I'd say, a relatively quiet game. thinking the likes of Palmer, Delap, Enzo Fernandez. But there were some constants that you can always rely on. Got Caicedo, the destroyer, consistently breaking up Benfica's counter-attacks. Reece James showing his strength against Benfica's wingers, getting his body in the way, shoving them off the ball, what he does best. And of course, Robert Sanchez having his usual brain-dead moment, passing the ball to one of Benfica's attackers, this time rolling it out directly to them. And thankfully, he got bailed out by his defenders. Now, I'm not going to be too harsh on our attacking players for now. I acknowledge playing conditions were difficult. The heat of North Carolina, 33 degrees Celsius, I think edging on 34. I just think the passing needed to be crisper. Communication needed to be better between the players. And too many times I saw the midfield and attack just not being on the same wavelength. Now, I do think the connections will develop, particularly with the team needing to adapt to Delap leading the line. I saw balls go over the top where he wanted them to feet, and then vice versa. Caicedo remonstrated with him a couple of times when he was playing balls over the top, and Delap was coming short. But yeah, I think those things will come. Before we do move on, I thought Maresca's tactics were again a bit strange. Palmer operated in the left half space rather than the right. It's been tried, it's been tested, and it's shown to be lacking. His best position, well, is somewhere on the right-hand side. Whether you think that's the right half space or the right wing, let me know down in the comments. The way he played today just kept coming deep to collect the ball on the left, and finally managed to progress the ball, but that was more due to his elite progressive carries and dribbling. But you could really see that his impact was hampered in the final third. Now, it did allow Cucurella to get further forward, and he created a couple of really good goal-scoring opportunities in normal time. But I think you'll agree that I'd much rather Palmer was in those positions than Cucurella. And Cucu can get into those positions, we see it time and again, without needing Palmer to occupy those left half spaces, and Cucurella just interchanging with our midfielders anyway. Moving on to Romeo Lavia, I'd say he was pretty solid in midfield overall. He seems to be developing as time goes on following his injury setbacks. He almost completed 90 minutes, but not quite. And it's interesting to see he's still never completed a full 90 minutes for Chelsea during his career, but hopefully that day is coming closer. Let me know your thoughts down below. Tell me who you rated from today's game. We've now obviously got a quarter-final against Palmeiras, which is on the 5th of July, and I'll make sure to release a preview video before that. And there's also the small matter of getting a massive amount of money from winning the competition. I mean, Chelsea's already made roughly £47.5 million getting this far in the tournament. If we win the Club World Cup, we would earn, it's estimated, in the region of £90 million. Now imagine that being added to our finances and boosting our summer transfer budget. The downside of this, of course, is that going deeper into this competition really condenses the recovery time and the pre-season the team has, and that could have a real knock-on impact for next season. It'll also reduce the amount of time the team has to gel with new signings like Jamie Bynoe-Gittens, who's on the cusp of joining our club. Albeit he can't play for us in this competition now, having played for Dortmund already. But what do you think? Do you want us to win this competition? Are you not bothered? Or would you actively prefer for us to duck out in the next round to get the players fresher for next season? Let me know down in the comments. Speaking of Jamie Gittens, we now have the here we go from Fabrizio Romano following Fabrice Hawkins, high-tier French football reporter, who was first on the scene to confirm that a deal has now been struck between Chelsea and Borussia Dortmund. Now, I've seen different transfer fees being thrown around, but it sounds like the clubs have landed on a total package of around £55 million, with Gittens signing a 7-year contract with Chelsea, so that's valid until June 2032. Now, who knows what the £55 million actually amounts to, how much is up front, how much are add-ons, what quantity of those are actually achievable, what are a bit more kind of unrealistic or ambitious. I'm sure we'll find out in the coming days. Tell me down below in the comments, do you think this represents good value? Albeit, we have yet to find out what the actual final number is. In fact, let's hold that thought and talk a little bit more about Gittens. What do we know about him? Well, currently he's 20 years old. He turns 21 this August, so he is super young, though clearly not by Chelsea standards, looking at our squad currently. It's just the kind of player we go for these days. He was born in Reading, joined Reading's youth team, had some trials at Chelsea, then decided to join Man City's youth setup at, I think, under 15 level. And clearly, following Maresca, Palmer, Lavia, Delap, we are no strangers to the Man City youth teams. Anyway, Gittens joins Borussia Dortmund from Man City a couple of years later in 2020, and he's been there ever since. Now, he did have some early injuries, and I've seen a not insignificant tranche of people on social media talking about him being injury prone, although I don't think there's enough evidence of that. But he did have some early injuries, it has to be said, including a torn ligament, following which he did impress in the youth team at Dortmund and was called up to the senior men's team towards the end of the 2021-22 campaign, thinking about April 2022, and has since scored and assisted a number of goals in the Bundesliga, as well as the Champions League, predominantly playing as a left winger. Now, he's also been in the England youth setup, including at under 19 and under 21 levels, and reports suggest that Chelsea had initial talks with Dortmund to sign Gittens in January of this year, and also spoke with his camp, and have clearly resumed those talks in early June and since. Now it looks like the deal is done, subject to a medical, which you think would be a formality at this stage, and perhaps by the time you watch this video that medical's done and he's joined the club. So what's he going to bring to Chelsea? Well, the pros are he's an electric dribbler. He can easily beat a defender on his day. He can go both ways. He can cut inside and out. He's a clinical striker of the ball with very little backlift. Now, last season, and we will look at some stats shortly, but last season he exceeded his XG, his expected goals, by 4.4 goals. Now, that's despite not being favoured by new-ish manager Niko Kovac and playing in a system which doesn't suit him at all, with wing-backs, no real touchline wingers, which is obviously what Maresca likes, but inside forwards instead, which just isn't his game. In spite of that, he got 12 goals and 3 assists in 48 appearances, many of which were off the bench, and as I say, not in his favoured system by any means. Now, those stats aren't remarkable, but considering his age, he's 20 years old, coming on to 21, and in that kind of inside forward and wing-back system, with a manager who's not really backing him, making it clear that he's not really in his plan, no natural wingers, I'd say there's certainly scope for growth there. Do we need him? I mean, we are seemingly stockpiling players, but actually in this context, in a word, yes. We've got Madueke, who's provisionally banned for breaching the FA's anti-doping laws. No confirmation yet of how long he'll be out, but really serious question marks over whether he'll ever play for Chelsea again. We've also decided not to sign Sancho to a permanent contract after his loan expired from Man United. Personally, I think that's the right decision by the club, but it does mean that we have the very young academy prospect Tyrick George as our only natural left-sided winger, and rumours suggest that George could go on loan, but more on that in another video. Right, let's look at some stats on Gittens and see how he compares with Noni Madueke and Pedro Neto on the right-hand side. So I'm going to put Gittens' stats up on screen for you now. Right, so on the left-hand side, you've got Jamie Gittens' scouting report, courtesy of FB Ref, and on the right, you've got Noni Madueke's. You may already have noticed some similarities. We'll start with Gittens. So positively, we've got 85th percentile for non-penalty goals, so 0.41 per 90, nearing that kind of goal every 2 games mark, which I think is pretty impressive, particularly when you consider that he is only 20 years of age. However, people will say, this is the Bundesliga, so you have we'll call the Bundesliga tax, and we've seen it a few times, haven't we, where that just doesn't translate in the Premier League, and specifically for Chelsea, where you've got players like Nkunku, previously Havertz and Werner, who did the business in the Bundesliga but couldn't quite translate that onto the pitch in the Premier League. So fine, this has to be taken with a pinch of salt, but I will say Gittens is clearly a very different player. You can see that just looking at some of the other positives, his progressive carries, 91st percentile, impressively successful take-ons, 99th percentile, 3.57 per 90, are really impressive. Sticking with those progressive carries, as I understand it, that's where Gittens has taken the team 10 metres or more forward with his dribbling. So you can see that he is a very good dribbler, and we'll come on to a different chart on dribblers in a moment. Other kind of positive stats for him, you can see he's in the 75th percentile for touches in the attacking penalty area with 5.53 per 90, and he receives a decent number of progressive passes, about 9.2 per 90. His tackles and interceptions aren't bad, particularly when you consider he is a winger, and this is a comparison against other attacking midfielders and wingers. So you would expect those to be a little bit lower as well. If we look at some of the more worrying stats, let's call them, his assists aren't particularly impressive. So we're looking at being in the 18th percentile, so 0.1 per 90. And you've got, likewise, with expected assisted goals in the 16th percentile. His shot creating actions, he's in the 42nd percentile, so it's not the worst, with 3.57 per 90. And actually, The Athletic did a report on him where actually his shot creating actions are reasonably good for his specific position, and he gets into a lot of decent positions, gets himself into a lot of decent positions to get shots off with relatively little backlift. His progressive passes are pretty low, but when you compare that to his progressive carries and successful take-ons, you start to develop an image of this guy being, clearly favouring dribbling over passing in terms of his progression, but perhaps worryingly being a bit of a head-down dribbler. You look at his shots versus his assists, and you can see that he's someone who dribbles quite a lot. He has a high dribbling frequency, but those don't always end up in passes or crosses, or at least successful passes and crosses, and more often than not, they do end up in shots. A positive spin on that is he creates chances for himself. The caveat being he doesn't always create chances for his fellow teammates. Now, looking across at Noni, you can see that he's only in the 66th percentile for non-penalty goals, and we've seen that throughout the last couple of seasons. Albeit his non-penalty XG is quite high in the 94th percentile, so he's clearly underperforming his expected goals, I would say quite significantly, despite taking a decent number of shots, 3.54 per 90, being in the 93rd percentile. He is relatively low for assists, being in the 30th percentile, but that's still better than Gittens. And his non-penalty expected goals plus expected assisted goals is actually quite decent, so in the 87th percentile. So actually it probably means that his teammates aren't scoring the goals that they would be expected to score based on their XG as well, so it's not all Noni's fault. Shot creating actions is extremely similar to Gittens at 3.5 per 90 compared to Gittens' 3.57. His passing stats are quite similar. His progressive carries, again, very similar. 99th percentile to Gittens' 91st percentile, but both very high. His successful take-ons are actually significantly lower than Gittens, which isn't really what I was expecting, given that that's Noni's bread and butter. He likes to take on his man. I'd say that has probably dipped in the last season in terms of successful take-ons, and he's now in the 76th percentile. Gittens remains in the 99th percentile, but again, you've got that Bundesliga tax. You've got much more physical defenders in the Premier League than in the Bundesliga, and that might contribute to it. So it will remain to be seen whether Gittens can stay in the 99th percentile or thereabouts following his move to the Premier League. Now let's go with a slightly different graphic here. So we've got a comparison between Gittens and Neto. This is courtesy of the Maclac app. You can see Gittens in blue and Neto in red, and you can see that despite Neto's goal-scoring performances recently, which I don't think are taken into account, in fact, I'm certain that they're not taken into account with this chart because this is Premier League and Bundesliga only. You can see that Gittens has 0.41 non-penalty XG in the Bundesliga alone, whereas Pedro Neto is down at 0.16. Their shot frequency or volume is pretty close. Gittens has a slightly higher shot volume at 2.6 per 90 compared to Neto's 2.3. But Gittens' shooting percent is a lot higher at 16 to Neto's 6.8. Passing percentage is actually pretty similar. Neto is much higher, more than double for assists, and more than double for expected assists. Open play shots relatively similar, though Gittens has 2.6 to Neto's 2.1. Carries into the penalty box, self-created shot percentage, successful dribbles, all much higher for Gittens than Neto. We've seen that Neto isn't one of those who takes on his man as frequently as, say, a Madueke or a Gittens. You can just see that in the season gone. Neto will cut back more, play the ball back to a midfielder inside and make a run, trying to play that 1-2 to get in behind. He has started, I would say, towards the end of the season, trying to take on his man more, I think based on instructions from Maresca. But he clearly is not one of those players who is going to do it as naturally and as often as a Gittens or a Madueke. Interestingly, Gittens' interceptions plus tackles is higher than Neto's, and it's higher than Madueke's, and so I think he will be a player that Maresca relies on to track back a little bit more than, well, I mean, Neto does that, but certainly more than Madueke, and play on the front foot out of possession as well. Right, Chelsea fans, that is a wrap for our very first episode of The Blue Lens. I hope you enjoyed our discussion on the Club World Cup, the Gittens saga and the stat comparison. Of course, if you did enjoy it, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to The Blue Lens for all of the latest Chelsea content, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. And most importantly, get in those comments. What are your thoughts on Gittens? Who do you want to see us sign? And what do you want me to cover in the next episode? Let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, up the Blues.